start the recording. So we're recording now, and I will mute and turn it over to you.
All right, thank you very much. Welcome everyone who is here or watching later. I am Lillias McGuffin, and this class is Creating Awesome Event Ads. I have previously been local chronicler twice. I am currently the Northern Regional, and up until last July, I did my 2-year stint as Kingdom Chronicler. So I've kind of been on both the making and the receiving end of these. And so that's why I created this class. It is basically for anyone who would ever be in any way involved in anything that might need an event ad. Because while chroniclers generally get this information, often the person designing the event ad and then the people signing off on the event ad and sending it in are not the chronicler. So it made sense that everyone should know how to do this because seneschals have to sign off on them. It helps if you know what needs to be in one. Event stewards are often designing them or just they get asked, so is this good if they had an artist do one. And so I just wanted to make sure that all of it was covered. And we will discuss a little bit the updates for if it's a virtual event versus a physical event, because now that's a thing. The first thing, though, are the things that are consistent for sending it to the Black Star for printing purposes. And that is that there are still size requirements. The full page is going to be a 7.5 inch by 10 inch because the newsletter is printed in 8.5 by 11. The half page would then be a 7.5 by 5 tall. Please keep these in the portrait style because that's the way they're going to be put into the newsletter. And if you don't send it in a nice pre-organized format that is portrait, you will drive the Kingdom Chronicler insane trying to make it work in the software. Please be considerate and design it in portrait. We will be going over what's on the event ad checklist for what needs to go in that in a minute. You can look at past Black Stars for inspiration for what these need to look like, because anything that's in there obviously got approved, which means you can use it as an idea. Please keep your text readable and your directions helpful and succinct. The one big thing I do want to point out is you absolutely must use the society-wide event registration standardized wording for costs. This is kind of critical because as a nonprofit, and this changed about 4 years ago, because the wording has changed every few years, for years, we do not use the word fee as a nonprofit organization in the United States. We don't use the word fee. So adult event registration, adult member discount event registration, which is kind of long, but at least accurate. Child is the older category and youth is the younger category. I know that's going to confuse a few people because in our kingdom, we've often done it the other way. But when they surveyed all the kingdoms, they found that slightly more used it this way. So when standardizing, they just went, this is what we're going to do. So the adult event registration is your high-end price for people who aren't paying a membership discount. Then the second one is the price with the membership discount, or what we in the SCA tend to think of as, what we're setting as our standard fee when we think about setting prices, for an event, for that coming. The child is the older group, youth is the younger group. I do know that a lot of people have been talking about, and we've been moving towards making children possibly up to 17 and under free. And I know that's not a decision made by the person making the event ad. But something to keep in mind is if your group goes that route, which would be awesome, I'm sure all the parents would love it, make sure that that's noted on there. You would still have that category and you would just say free. Kind of like we usually have that youth category, for little kids that says, 5 and under are free. But you would still put that on there. So there's no question. So we're going to take a quick look here at the event ad checklist. And you can find this if you ever, need a copy on the Kingdom Chronicler website. In fact, all the information we're going over today is on the Kingdom Chronicler webpage, chronicler.onstaora.org. There's a whole section in extreme detail, if you need someone to like hold your hand and walk you through word by word on how to put together an event ad. This is on there. It is a fillable PDF if you download it, which is the best kind, because for years you had to print this off. The Seneschal had to mark it, check it off a lot, sign it, and then scan it back in. You don't have to do that anymore. It's wonderful. And it saves a lot of time when you're not running around trying to get a copy to your Seneschal. But what's on here, and I'm just going to read it because I don't know if it's big enough for everybody to see it real well on a PowerPoint. It includes the date of the event, modern date, you know, your day, your month, your year. The name of the sponsoring group needs to be on the event ad. The location, which if that's still a physical site, it's going to be the site and the address. If it's online, that's going to be what kind, if it's going to be Zoom, if it's going to have a Facebook event. Ideally, you would have a link to the Facebook event or group that's the focus. If it's not created yet, you will need to tell people where to go to get that information. But you'll need to say if it's going to be on Zoom versus if it's going to be, you know, what medium is going to be used. Zoom, Skype, whatever it is. The time site opens and closes, or the event opens and closes. If it's online, you still don't want people showing up at funny hours, expecting someone to be in a room, holding it open. The name of the event, and then the name of the event steward, whoever that is. You're still gonna want a phone number and an email address for your event stewards, or at least one of them. If you have more than one, that's always nice, especially because every so often someone has a very valid personal reason why they don't want their contact information out in public view. So they need to have a contact number. It does not necessarily have to be their personal contact number, but that needs to be on there so people can reach them. We did stop requiring them to post a physical mailing address. That is no longer a requirement because it stopped being a known world requirement. So we stopped requiring it because that's really the critical privacy element right there. You must have the statement, make checks payable to, if you're charging money, and the SCA group and name, as there always has been. That correct wording for the registration. You have to have the minor waiver statement about minors must be accompanied by a parent or legal guardian. The nice thing about these statements is if you pull this up, you can copy and paste them directly into your ad from the website or from this form, so you don't have to remember how to say them. And you do have to have, if you are having it at a physical location, a camera-ready map or written directions to site. Somebody should be able to use the event ad should their GPS stop working in the middle of nowhere, Texas or Oklahoma, and still get to site. It should be clear and easy to read. And if the map has not been used for a Kingdom event ad before, please send a release form from whoever designed it. You cannot just copy and paste a Google map because we don't have the rights to use those. It must be a designed piece of art. And as you'll see when we look at some of the examples of ads, they don't have to be fancy. They don't even have to be particularly, you know, artistic looking, just legible, and people should be able to follow them. You will need releases from artists for any artwork being used. So that definitely needs to come in. If what you were using is public use clip art, please include the link to that and the release information. The Seneschal of your group will sign off on this form. And those are the requirements. The nice thing about signing on the form now is if the Seneschal simply sends this to the Kingdom Chronicler through the Seneschal's email, that now counts as an official signature because it comes from their email. So the assumption, the approval is assumed. So there's no more printing and signing and scanning back in. Not when you can just check it all off on the computer. But as the seneschal, please be sure you have actually made certain that these things are correct on your event ad. Because sometimes I did occasionally get a seneschal checklist, and when I looked at the ad, the things they had marked off were not, in fact, on the event ad. Because, and this is not a knock on anybody designing one, there's a lot of little details. It's very easy to miss something that you're sure you put in there because you thought about it. So, just always double check. We do have some suggestions on here for things that you should add or can add, but are not required to get it into the newsletter. So if you don't know yet, that's okay. But things like if the stranger can actually find site using your map at 2 a.m. after driving for 7+ hours, and they haven't looked at an atlas lately, or they don't have GPS. Is it all typed? Typed is preferable. Please do not handwrite, because if we're blowing this up at all or shrinking it down or adjusting it, handwriting does not adjust well, and it's not always super legible. Are there beverage restrictions? Is site wet? Is it dry? Is it discreetly wet in period containers? This happens a lot. If there is a feast, what is feast going to cost? What's going to be in it? Will there be feast at all? Or where should people go to find that information? Are pets allowed? Or what restrictions are there on animals? This is a common one, especially if we're doing camping events in Onsteora, because we have a lot of people who love to bring their pets, and a lot of pets who love coming to events and are well behaved and wonderful, but some sites love them and some sites do not. And so definitely always make that clear, or somebody is going to show up with the pet if you don't say something. Can it be read easily? Are the fonts good? Basic stuff. So that's the big thing for event ads as far as what's on the checklist. Are there any questions about what needs to be in the ad? We are going to be looking at layout next. So if you have layout questions, we will be getting to that shortly. Okay. All right, real quick, this is a little comparison of physical events versus virtual. A lot of it's the same. You might have noticed that most of it's the same. The big difference, of course, is with a virtual event, a lot of the time there may be no cost. So you wouldn't have to put that information. You might put no site registration on there, just if you're not charging anything and no one's gonna have to hop on PayPal and pay for the event. I haven't seen anyone try to charge for an online event yet, but obviously if you're not charging that much, you don't have to have all of that verbiage. Just say there is no registration cost. You still need the hosting group, you still need the dates. You'll list a virtual location instead of a physical location, so you're not going to need a map or directions. Just be able, if they need to check Facebook, or if it's going to be Zoom links where they would find them the day of, that information. Since all events should still have their information on the Kingdom website, in the calendar page or on their group websites, that information is still expected. So you're still going to have that information. So people should be able to find the Zoom links or the virtual location, the Facebook, somewhere in the official publications of the group for the event. And you still need your event steward information, because there will be questions and they have to go to the qualified person, or they'll go to literally everyone else in the group on Facebook somewhere. So what makes a good layout? You have all the information, and there's kind of a lot of information that could go in an event ad, but not everything needs to be in your event ad. Use easy to read fonts. I know it's really tempting to use a lot of the beautiful, fancy, florid, medieval looking hand fonts. They're not always easy to read. And if you use particularly specialized fonts, you need to send the font file to the chronicler, because if they don't have that font on their computer, it will not appear in the newsletter. And once that newsletter is a PDF, sometimes you may have noticed that even if you've used a fun font in a PDF, it doesn't always come across on someone else's system. So getting really weird fonts does not serve you well if it's being sent anywhere other than your own system. So avoid over cluttering. It is possible, since you also have a website and usually at this point a Facebook event on which you can put information. Not every single thing has to go on your ad. You do not have to explain every competition and the rules and everything in your ad, because then what you end up with is a page of text. And you'll see, you know, as we look at different ads, some of them have a lot more text than others. And while that works okay in some cases, in others it makes it harder to tell what's important and what they want to be, you know, where to draw the eye, where do they need to be reading to get the critical information. Because not everybody wants to read a whole page ad if it's nothing but text. Contrasting artwork is good, because while it's going to be in color, you know, online, the ad, if printed in the black and white printed version of the Black Star, because, you know, when it goes to publication, while we get the pretty online color version, they do still print and mail those out to people who have asked for print copies. And those are in black and white. So if your art does not stand out well in contrast in black and white, it's not going to look good in that print copy. So while it can definitely be in color, you're still thinking about basic composition there. And of course, symmetry and balance. Is it something that's pleasing to the eye, or something that people are going to look at it and go, oh, that looks good, I'm curious about that event? Because we do sometimes judge the book a little bit by its cover, you know, or by the event by its ad, a little bit. So what I wanted to do, are there any questions before we take a look at some ads? Because I actually have some examples in here that I thought we could look at them, and then everyone is welcome to talk at this point, because I'm going to open them up to what do you notice about these ads? What's good about them, or what could be better? Because everyone I'm going to show you was in fact an approved ad that made it into the Black Star. We're not going to look at anything that wasn't good enough to make it in or had problems, because then that, you know, it gets in your head, and I don't want you to ever think of the wrong image. But we are going to take a look at these. I also want to briefly talk about why you might want a half-size ad, and we're going to see what one of those looks like next to its full size here in a minute. Half-size ads are awesome. For one thing, if you want to do teaser ads and publish them early to get people's attention, they are more likely to fit in the newsletter if you use a half size. Because, and you may have noticed some months, there's like 10 or 11 event ads in the Black Star. You know, and if you're trying to get stuff in those months, other than your official ad, the only one the chronicler has to guarantee gets posted is the one that is, you know, the month of your event, because that's the official legal. If it's not posted, the Crown can't give out awards at that event one. So, which is why getting your event ad in on time is critical, because otherwise it's not an official event still by SCA law. So you want that in. But a half page is great for getting them in early. And so you can use a half as your full ad if you want to. But they fit in more easily, and it's easier to get that information in earlier. If there's a smaller one that, you know, if they've got a half a page or a page at space, you can drop it in there, because that's a lot easier to do. Because the Black Star, when they went to the current publisher that the whole SCA uses for that black and white printing, the publisher set the size at 16 pages for all the Kingdom newsletters. That's why we can't just add another couple of pages, which is a little frustrating sometimes, you know, if you have a lot of stuff, but it's the way that it is. So that's why, if you've ever been like, well, why can't you just add more space? It's not in Kingdom control. That was not a Kingdom decision, other than, you know, the SCA went to this one publisher, gives the great, you know, deal they do for the printed ones and handles that. So 16 pages is the limit. Neither shall there be more nor less. Every month it is 16. So half pages are awesome. And they can be really effective because the critical information fits very nicely in a half a page. So we are going to take a look at those when we get there. When you're sending in your publication, Critical point, please send it in as a PDF file. The software the Kingdom uses to put the newsletter together, the easiest thing ever is it will let you just drop a whole PDF in, sized for a page, and it will just show up on the page. Also, please do not combine it with your checklist or any of your media releases. It needs to be its own singular separate file, or the Kingdom Chronicler has to go back in and pull them apart, because otherwise it's all going in the newsletter. Single page, single PDF. The others can be PDFs, but send them as a separate document, please. But send it in PDF for a number of reasons. If you send a graphic and there's something wrong with it, or a graphic you've turned into a PDF, if you send a picture and there's something minor wrong, the Kingdom Chronicler cannot fix it for you, because it's it's how that works. If you send a PDF, I had, Adobe Pro. If it was a minor typo, it actually has text editing, and I could fix, oh, they accidentally used the word fee, and I could go remove the word fee and not have to send it all the way back to your group and ask, could you please fix this? And if it arrived, the day before the newsletter was due out, I don't want to be sending stuff back to people. And, the current Kingdom Chronicler didn't want to be that person either. If you send something in it and the Kingdom Chronicler cannot quickly fix it, they're going to send it back and say, this needs to be fixed, which is why it helps if it's done right the first time. If you're not sure, having it done early and sending it in like the week before it's due and say, hey, is this right, is awesome. Because then if it's right, you're done. And if not, you have time and no one's stressing at the last minute. So send it in PDF. The Seneschal must check off all the required elements, that they are correct. The Seneschal must actually look and verify that those things are really in the ad. And again, that email counts as a signature. So as long as you email it from your actual Seneschal email, it counts as signed, whether you printed it off and signed it or not. So you can pull up the virtual, the digital version of the checklist. You can mark it off in your PDF thing, hit save, and email it. It's much simpler now than it used to be. A reminder, the due date for the ad is the first day of the month before the month you want it in, because the newsletters, the time, based on the dates, the Kingdom Chronicler has to have it in. If you're doing the June newsletter, the Kingdom Chronicler has to have that up to publication by May 10th. So we ask that everything be in by May 1st, so that there's time to put it all together and request corrections as needed if something is missing, and get it all done. So that's why if it's for June, you turn it in by the 1st of May. And if you just always remember you need it a month before the month of your event, you'll be okay. And if you want it, if something in a newsletter even earlier than that, that's when you send in half-page teaser ads, and please very nicely request, if there is room, that those go in. None of this keeps you from giving out information about your event online, through the unofficial channels that are Facebook forever and ever and ever, because you can be advertising. But for the official stuff, those are the deadlines. Okay, so here are the examples. I have a few slides of examples so we can have a little fun with this, of event ads that have been used in the past. And this is kind of the interactive part of the class. Everybody who's here is welcome to look at these and pop up with anything you notice about them. What is good about these ads and what could be improved? What do you notice when you look at these based on the criteria we have discussed?
So the Serpent Symposium one feels wicked crowded to me. Like, I like the art on it, but my eye does not know where to go.
Okay.
On that one. I like the more linear feeling of the King's College one.
Okay, right. I would say definitely. Others?
Yeah. Also on the Serpent Symposium, the font is, while fancy and snazzy, could be problematic for some people.
Yeah.
So I see an issue with the font. I do like that they have a map. Let's see here. I think that using the font in some places gives it, a good feel. I actually like the top of the Serpent Symposium one, where it's pretty. That part is good. The top quarter of it, except for the use of the fonts on the address, I like that. But yeah, the rest of it is kind of, I can see why there's a lot of stuff there, and that's the problem on a half-page ad, being careful about making sure you get all the stuff you're supposed to have, but not overwhelming people. Having done some billboard ads before, they tell you that, if you're going to make a billboard ad, that you want to think that the person who's seeing it is going to be driving at 80 miles an hour down the road, and they've got to see it real quick. That doesn't exactly apply here, but to a certain degree, you've got to catch the attention, and then if people want more detail, then there needs to be place for that, but you've got to grab their attention first. The King's College one looks nice, but kind of bland.
Okay, yeah. Well, and you brought up several very good points. And one of the things that I like that you mentioned is with the fonts, not easy to read can also translate to not easy to read for people with vision problems or reading disabilities or anything. It's not necessarily, compliant for any of that, or people who are half blind, there's, which could be a decent number of us. So definitely that's a thing. The layout, I will say these are in fact full page ads. I've just paired them up on the slides so we can look at things side by side. These are 8.5 by 11s when they're blown up and in print. But yes, no, definitely. The lack of what is clearly a heading to tell you what things are does make things appear more crowded. So that's something to notice, is if all your font is the same size, sometimes you don't know where you're supposed to be looking just because there's nothing to guide you to the information you're looking for, even if it's right there. So, no, absolutely. Awesome points. And yeah, your art wants to stand out without being distracting. All right, so this one is an example. This is actually one of the ones that I have that has a full and a half version. So I put it up here in both because the half page ad does in fact have all the critical information on it. So it is a nice example of a way you can do that. And then there's the full page ad for Protectorate as well. That was put in there. So what do you think about this one, everybody?
I really like both of them, actually. They're easy to read. It's easy to, see where things are. I like the divider down the middle as a way to separate it, and then the fact that they put the little piece of art in there and the little separate box at the bottom of the full page ad, that looks really nice too.
Okay.
I don't have anything negative about that one.
That's fine. You don't have to, like I said, all of these obviously passed. They were all in the Black Star. So none of these are bad ads, but because they have all the important information, which is the critical part.
Right.
But the visual design element is part of making a eye-catching and effective ad. So this one's nice because they underline the headings.
Yeah.
They make a point of saying, here is where the prices are. here is the site location. To make it easier to see, they make effective use of bold and underline, which, given the way this is lined, is very effective even with the whole layout. And it's because this was the Traveler's Guide to the Known World. So you can kind of see the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy kind of clean lines. It's, you know, manages to kind of evoke that sci-fi without being openly, dramatically a science fiction looking ad, you know, for a medieval event. And the contrast, I always liked this one for the contrast because it's already in black and white. It looks really good when it's printed in black and white.
Yep.
And they could have had this in color. You know, the yellow would have shown up just fine in a color version of this as well, where the light gray is.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so this is a really good example of something you can do. And the fact that obviously you can fit everything on a half page.
Yeah.
If you don't try to describe everything and put in too much flavor text. Save complex flavor text for the website, because your website link will be on here. Here's the event website. They can go read all the flavor text you want to put on the site. And the rules for the competitions go on the site, you know, because chances are some of that stuff is still being written by the time you've turned in your ad. Anyway, knowing how people in the SAA love to plan things dramatically in advance. All right, and then the last example that I had this evening were these two, which were also used. And you'll see here one from the Shire of Rosenfeld, or one of the many Three Things events that we've had. And this was the one that you'll notice has the Centurion Eagle on it. And then the one next to it was one of the, it was teaser and official in many ways for on Sierra 40th. You probably saw this one a lot, but the information updated often depending on the event. So this was the official one that was the simpler one that did not have all of the preview information that all the ones the previous months had. Because if I had a month, because I was also the Kingdom, you know, chronicler at the time, and there was extra space in the newsletter, I just added more information about what was coming up for 40th because we had plenty. And that was something people were interested in reading about. So it was a good place to put it. But this was the official one-page ad for that event. Thoughts?
I like the 40th year one. It's clean, easy to read. You know, maybe not as flashy as some of the other ones, but it does the job. And the map is a good size. The Three Centurions, I don't like their Centurion Eagles in the background. To me, it makes it hard to read.
Mm-hmm.
And
that is something
really,
yeah.
They don't really have things, you know, it's all kind of just, it looks like it's just a big dump. Whereas, you know, the 40th year one looks a little better organized.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I got distracted here. So I heard something about the eagle. Did you say something about that being behind the text, or?
Yeah, I don't like that.
Yeah.
This is one of those things that could be visibly striking, but especially when that prints in black and white, and especially when you're looking at it on a screen, which a lot of us are now because we get them digitally. And if you'll notice, it also has a beautiful, but it's one of those more complicated fonts. So if you had a simpler font to read or larger text to enhance the contrast, it would be simpler.
Yeah.
And the reason that one is what it is you look, and it's lovely, and it's got all the critical information. And at least, you know, the address and the site times are not in a fancy font.
True.
But there's more than one fancy font used, if you look at it, which is a little conflicting and a little complicated. And yeah, that contrast with that, and a lot of it at the top, I mean, it's good stuff, and it's not overly long, but it's flavor text. You know, a question is often posed in the Kingdom of Onsteora. Which region prevails over the others? Because this was, you know, our rivalry of the regions event. And it's well written, it's exciting, it is. But visually, it's a little harder to follow.
Yeah.
And yeah, and because after you get past that stuff, you have all the flavor text, And then the event registration information is down at the, like down near the bottom.
Right.
Generally, the most important information that people are going to look for should just all be at the top of the ad. Because they don't want to have to look for it. So if you have, here's the event, here's when it's going to be, where it's going to be, what it's going to cost you, and if there's food, should probably be the first things you tell people.
Yep.
So that they know how to plan. And then they'll be happy to read everything else you want to say. Or, you know, it's just helpful to be like, and go to this website for all the wonderful information about the cool things we'll be doing. It is a very, I mean, it's a very effective ad. I mean, but yes, there are always going to be some challenges with wanting to make, you know, how you decide to make it fancy. Because you can make it visually striking without using really complicated, fancy stuff. And I do try, my personal preference has always been not to have the overlapping art because while it can be an amazing effect, it does not work so well for this particular medium.
Yeah, if I may, as somebody who actually years ago used to work for Kinko's and worked in reproduction, yeah, those things don't always come out well off the copier. So no. Yeah.
I mean, obviously it worked okay. I mean, this is basically what it looked like if you pulled it up in your Blackstar. And it's got all the critical information. It's a good functional ad, but it could be, yeah. So are there any questions from anyone on anything we've covered, or maybe anything I haven't covered that you have questions about regarding event ads? Okay. If not, then that is what I wanted to cover this evening. And thank you all so much for coming. I really appreciate it. And I hope that you'll all be able to go out and everybody's event will have wonderful, beautiful, easy to read event ads that will make everyone want to come to your event.
Thank you so much. That was a great class. Really.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Have a great evening.
Have a good night.
Take care.
Good night.